1. I am a 23-year-old female born and raised in Brazil, in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. You can Google it if you're curious. It's in southern Brazil and borders Argentina and Uruguay. I will not tell you in which city to keep my safety. Maybe this history will get a little long, but I will tell you guys how I started listening to voices in 2019. Those voices were male, and they asked me where I was going and what song I was listening to. I was very scared at first. I thought I was schizophrenic. I told my mom of the voices, and she, who's very religious, told me it was a divine gift. My mom follows Umbanda, a Brazilian religion with origins in the Yoruba people of Nigeria. This religion emerged in Brazil because of the slave trade carried out by Europeans in the Americas. She took me to a priestess, Yalarixa in the Yoruba, who prayed with me and passed herbs over my body, and it made the voices stop for a while. But between 2019 and February 2021, several paranormal things kept happening to me, and I will list some to get to the point. I wake up my family in the middle of the night screaming for help, and they rush to my room to help me, and I'm in a nightmare. When they wake me up, I don't remember anything. This happened many times and still happens. One night I was driving with my cousin and her friend when I saw on the side of the road a very beautiful blonde woman in a black dress that looked to be from 1710 to 1750. She was just standing there. I'm sure she wasn't someone alive. When I was in my city church library, there was a frame on the wall with a picture of a man in white clothes, with black hair and a mustache. I asked the librarian who the man was, and she said that was no man. I insisted that was, and I asked again who he was. She asked me to show the frame. I took her to the wall it was on, and when we got there, the man was no longer in the picture. There was only a picture of a landscape. I work at an office, and when I was looking for a document in the office cabinet, I felt a hand touch my shoulder. I thought it was a colleague, and I turned to see who, but there was no one standing next to me. Everyone was on their computers more than 3 meters away from each other because of COVID-19. I woke up one night and there was a man standing in my bedroom looking at me. I spent a good 40 seconds trying to identify his appearance in the dark, but when I turned on the light, he disappeared. I turned off the light and went back to sleep. Every time something paranormal happens, I feel awkward, like a freak. When I talk about my experiences, some people think I'm crazy, others want to convert me. I don't have a religion because there is none I agree with and want to follow 100%. I don't know what happened in 2019 to change everything. Before that, I lived a normal life. There was no trauma or event that capitulated these experiences. They just started out of nowhere and never stopped. 2. Hey, I'm a 22-year-old German guy. I live in a pretty old area, so to speak. They found Bronze Age stuff here and even a Stone Age burial kind of thing, only 10 minutes away with bike. The house we moved in when I was around 4 was haunted. It may be a bit tame, but still terrified me and my sister. I don't know how old the house is, but it still had ventilation holes in the sides to cool the house in the summer. The house is a 2-story house where the floors were 2 apartments. A bigger property, about 3,000 square meters excluding the 3 garages, the house and the barn, all completely white on the outside. My sister told me later, she is older, that there was a pigeon with his breast and stomach cut open and intestines spilling out. When my parents first looked at the house, the seller said it was one of the wildcats doing, but there were no other bites or scratches on it. We, my parents, my sister and I, in the ground floor, my grandma upstairs. I would sometimes hear heavy footsteps in the middle of the night, which was odd for 2 reasons. First, my grandma was a very small, frail woman, and second, I wouldn't normally be awakened by this kind of stuff. I'm a very heavy sleeper, and you could make quite a bit of noise before I wake up. These footsteps managed at every time to wake me. In addition, I had this really old bunny plushie which my parents put on the big cabinet opposite my bed, so it would be looking at me sleeping. My parents said I liked it before, but I didn't like it anymore after we moved in. I can just barely remember that the bunny sometimes seemed to move in the night. I brushed it off until it fell down one night. My parents put it over 10 centimeters back, so even if it would have fallen over, it wouldn't have fallen down. My parents got rid of it after my absolute refusal to keep it. I also had terrible nightmares almost every night there, till the incident. After which I got a dream catcher and it majorly improved. Also, I always got an unpleasant feeling walking around after 10 p.m. when I got older. My grandma died of a sudden heart attack one time on her way to the bathroom at night. When I was up there, the bathroom and the small extra room with the hatch to the attic gave me the creeps. After my parents divorced and I got older, it got worse. The footsteps were more frequent. When I was alone, a door would suddenly swing shut. That door was partly glass and made a special sound, maybe a draft. But the door was closed before, and it would repeat that sound multiple times. Also, sometimes I felt a cold, rhythmic stream of cold air in my neck in bed. My sister later told me she heard the footsteps too. My mother always brushed it off as my imagination, and I should stop bothering her. The worst experience happened when I was 16 at summer break. At this point, I got partially used to the home ghost. I knew how he felt. He came a lot closer over the years, but never showed himself. This felt so different, like not just the extreme increase in uneasiness, but also the pure primal terror this one made me feel. I was playing video games at around 2 a.m. My room door is at my right, so it is always in my peripheral, and I always closed it. I just remember seeing the door open in my peripheral vision, and then suddenly this dark figure with bloodshot eyes, which looked as if he was completely insane, and a painfully big grin with completely even teeth. I panicked so hard I fell to the side away from it. I couldn't see it anymore, but still felt the panic. I closed the door as fast as I could, still felt it, and switched on every light and crawled in the corner of my bed, which was located in the corner. I didn't sleep that night or the next. After that, the feeling vanished, but the other one never came as close as before, and never felt the cold air in my neck again. Later, we finally moved, but to a 100-year-old farm, which is still in use but modernized a bit. We had to tear down the old living house and build a new one, which we did. While the construction tools were going missing and electronic devices would often short-circuit or stop working, I got a terrible feeling there for a good year. They were angry, I guess, because we tore down the house a bit. But that calmed down a bit, and after I tried to talk to them, they now feel more like protectors than unpleasant subtenants. 3. This is an unexplained paranormal encounter that my husband Buddy experienced. My husband and I were both born and raised in Vermont. My husband grew up in mostly Winsuki in an apartment complex. Near his home there were woods, a soap factory, a train bridge, let's call it the Blue Bridge, and the Winsuki River. Growing up, my husband said that the area of the soap factory, woods, bridge, and river always had a very eerie vibe, and people always had weird and creepy experiences there. People never really went down there after dark. Although my husband Buddy and two of his friends, Darren and Robbie, decided to go and spend the night camping in the woods anyway. It was a warm summer evening, and the sun was setting. My husband, Darren, and Robbie rode their bikes to the woods and picked out a spot to set up camp. They found a spot and set their sleeping bags out on the ground. Darren started a campfire, and they all sat around the fire for a little while. Two homeless people came up to them and started a conversation. They said that they lived in the woods, as do other homeless people in the area. It's about 12:30 a.m. Buddy and Robbie took their bikes and rode up to the old, abandoned soap factory. Darren stayed behind with the two people. When they reached the factory, they decided to ride their bikes on the loading ramps, doing jumps and stunts, and altogether just having fun. After riding for about 45 minutes, they both stopped to take a break, and were sitting on their bikes with their arms resting on the handlebars and were having a conversation. All of a sudden, a tow truck comes through the entrance of the soap factory with its headlights, dome light, and service lights on. Buddy and Robbie just kind of looked at each other, thinking it was weird that a tow truck was down there, considering the soap factory was abandoned, and there were no vehicles and nobody around that needed assistance. As the tow truck got closer, they looked into the cab of the truck and couldn't see anyone. The dome light was on, yet they couldn't see anyone inside the cab of the truck. Buddy got chills all down his spine when he realized there wasn't anyone in the driver's seat, let alone the entire truck. Buddy and Robbie got on their bikes and hightailed it out of the soap factory lot and headed straight towards the campsite. As they're riding away, the truck accelerated and started to chase them. Once Buddy and Robbie got near the campsite, they jumped off their bikes, allowing the bikes to continue riding over an embankment. They both jumped over the embankment and hid behind bushes. They could hear the truck driving down the narrow dirt path that winds through the woods and back out. They peeked around the bushes and could hear and see the truck slowly circling the path, looking for them. After what seemed like forever, but only lasted about 5 minutes, the truck finally left. Buddy and Robbie made their way back to the campsite. When they got there, Darren, the friend that stayed behind with the two homeless people, asked them if they had noticed that the truck had no driver. Obviously they had, and they told him about the truck chasing them. They discussed the tow truck and were all a bit spooked. Although it was scary, they still decided to camp out. If the tow truck came back, they would leave. The truck never came back. The homeless people headed on, and the three of them went to bed. The next morning, they packed up their sleeping bags and started to head home. They head back home, pushing the bikes along the dirt path through the woods. Just as they were about to exit the woods, they noticed 3 police cruisers and an ambulance at the tree line. When they reached the officers said they couldn't continue through the woods because there was a man that hung himself the night before. The crazy thing is that the spot where the man hung himself was only about 100 yards away from where they camped. They never went back to camp those woods again. This is only one example of the weird and creepy things that have happened in and around those woods. 4. Quick background for you lads that are ready to give this a listen. I don't really believe in full-blown paranormal activity. I've had sleep paralysis and seen shit of nightmares, terrifying dreams, but this story is what turned me into a true skeptic. For about 7 years during my later years of high school and most of my time in college, my family lived in a normal-sized one-story home in San Diego. The home had a Jack and Jill set up on the side of the house, which is basically 2 bedrooms with a bathroom in the middle, and this was connected to the rest of the house by one door in the first bedroom. Thankfully, I got the bedroom next door to the house, and my younger brother had to take the back bedroom. Maybe about a month into us living there, my brother started sleeping on the couch and my parents' room frequently, because he started to feel very uneasy about being in the back room. And for the longest time, I honestly thought he was being a little bitch. He complained about sleeping back there and the uneasiness of the room during the nighttime. During my entire time in high school, so when I graduated and went to college, he took my room, and the back room became a spare for a guest. Therefore, when I came back to visit during the summer, that was my room for the 2 or so months I was back home. After spending a few weeks in that room, I understood why my brother was always so unsettled from being back there, and he was definitely not being a bitch. It had a very unpleasant feeling to it, especially when you were trying to sleep during the night. I didn't think much of it, and I was very socially active during the day and spent nights out at my friends' places often after a good night of drinking, so I wasn't really tied down to it. However, the more I slept in there, summer after summer for about 3 years, I increasingly became more wary of the horrible feeling that began to grow inside me from sleeping in that room. In addition to the room being creepy as hell, it sucked that the phone connection and our home Wi-Fi with an extender was terrible in that room alone. Literally 5 feet to the bathroom and the connection was fine, but lay in bed in that room and suddenly went to shit. So here I am, bored as hell one night since nothing was going on, and I decide to fall asleep early. I turn off the light in the room and closet before I go to sleep, as usual, and slowly doze off. Note, the closet was completely unfinished and just had the heater to the house, and some weird unpainted old wood that lined the walls. Literally a closet from a horror movie. I wake up maybe 2 hours later, it's about 1:30 now, and notice the lights are turned back on, and the closet door is open with the light on. Me, being me, said fuck it, maybe someone's fucking with me, but oh well. I go to turn the lights off, close the closet door again, and drift back to sleep. For some reason, I wake up again 2 hours later, about 3:30 to 4 a.m. now, and notice that just the closet door is barely cracked open, and there's a glimmer of light peeking out from the side and under it. Now this spooks me a bit, definitely unsettling as I try to convince myself that maybe I forgot the light in the closet, and didn't close the door all the way, etc., etc. Therefore, I make it a point to close the door all the way and shut the light off for good, and tell myself if shit's like this in the morning, something's up. The only thing that got me back to sleep was me being exhausted, and I eventually doze back off and wake up in the morning. I wake up maybe around 7 a.m., and the first thing my instincts force me to do is look at the closet. First thing I notice is that it was shut, thank God, but since it was still dusk and the sun hadn't completely risen yet, I could see the light was flicked back on and saw it shining under the door. I immediately got up and left the room as I felt a presence was with me in the room that wanted me to notice it, and I immediately got jittery and anxious with a sick feeling in my stomach. The rest of my day went on as usual, and I didn't sleep in that room for maybe a week until I said, fuck it, Mom ain't raised no bitch. And the last year or so we had that house, I couldn't stop staring at the closet whenever I fell asleep. Nothing as clear as this ever happened again, but maybe 2 months before my parents moved out, we got some news from the neighbors. That house has had 2 families commit suicide, both under the same circumstances. The father had died from unknown circumstances, and shortly after that the mother and children of the 2 families committed suicide in that room. In addition to this, the previous owner of the house said he would never step foot in that room, considering that he felt a presence there as well, and was actually excited to leave the property the one time we met him before we moved out. He also said that about 15 years ago they redid the floor panels of that room and found that there was a line of 10 to 12 pairs of old-fashioned shoes under the floorboards, sitting there, and that they had left them there for whatever reason I don't know. Fast forward to a few days ago. My family has been out of the house for some time now, and I'm having a conversation with my dad while I'm visiting town. We talked about the old place, and he just found out what we found out a few months before moving out about the suicides, and said even he had a very strange, unsettling feeling in that room. Now, my dad is definitely no bitch and is a very straightforward dude, and once he said that even he had these feelings, the dots just sort of connected for me. I'm still not a strong believer of the paranormal, but after having this life experience, I put way more consideration into there being something else out there that we can't explain. And it still gives me a jittery feeling when I think about what we all experienced in that room, especially considering the history being that one room. The house was fine in all honesty, but that one back room still gives me chills today thinking about it. 5. In the early 1990s, I moved into a studio apartment, my first place to live without my family or roommates. The building had Art Deco treatment, so I assumed the building had been built sometime in the 1930s or 40s. At the time, I worked overnight shift at a tech company running computer backups. I would come home early in the morning and sleep until the afternoon. One such afternoon, I was awakened by a hand on my arm shaking me. When I turned over to see who it was and why they were in my apartment, I was confused when there was no one there. As weeks and months went by, I simply forgot about it. About a year later, the same thing happened again, a hand rousting me from my sleep, but no one there. Again, time went by, and I did not think about it much. Eventually, I was switched to a normal day shift at work. One day I came home from work and found a note from the building maintenance that they had repaired the stove but couldn't do anything about the missing shelves. As I had not called in any request, I contacted maintenance and they had confirmed their request had been placed for my apartment. I noted that the stove was indeed not working, but pressed for any information about who had called, as I had not told anyone about the stove, and few people even knew my address, let alone how to call in for repairs. The maintenance receptionist agreed it was weird, but would only repeatedly say that they received the call and fulfilled the job. I was now starting to entertain these incidents as something paranormal, but as the frequency was so spread out, I did not think much about it. Several months later, I woke up in the middle of the night, sat up in my bed, and immediately felt a presence in the room. My internal voice saying, "There's someone here." I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye, and quickly turned my head to focus on it. My eyes scanned to where the presence was coming from, but could not see anything. There was a streetlight outside my window, and with my window shades being nothing more than thick paper, it gave my room a diffuse yellow atmosphere. I could see everything in my apartment clearly, even at night. When I could not see anything out of place, my apprehension faded. Just as I completely calmed down, I could see a small distortion in my field of vision about 10 feet away, close to where most of the light was coming in. It was round and looked like a fisheye lens distortion, the size of a grapefruit about 3 feet off the floor. I was initially amused at seeing this right after being so nervous. As my gaze stayed on the distortion, it was moving at an angle that brought it closer to my bed, growing in size. By the time it got to about 2 feet from my bed, it was the size of a basketball. In a fraction of a second, this orb transformed from a distortion to a deep black solid sphere. My fear instantly returned as I realized this was not my eyes playing tricks on me. I turned away. I did not want to see this, but curiosity and a need to confirm that I was really seeing this, I turned my head back to face it. As I did, I saw that the black orb was now dissipating upwards, with multiple thick fluid tendrils interweaving with each other, the bottom still holding the semicircle shape. Soon a shape of a torso and a head could be seen, all white, still slowly floating to my left, until it was right at the edge of my bed. The deep black had given way to a dark grey outline, no discernible features on the figure, but the edges well defined. I could now see a masculine frame by the extremely broad shoulders, but only about 5 to 5.5 feet tall, with his back to me. Still with no legs, it almost seemed to be sitting in the original orb. In another split second, the arms appeared as if they were uncrossed from the front. It then popped out of the orb and began to move across the room away from me. The first few feet without legs, but then they dropped down to complete the body. For each step it took, it appeared oddly jittery, like an old film with a frame missing, and a secondary, more transparent motion blur-like image behind it. I was completely stunned by what I was watching. As it reached the far side of the room, I could see the figure begin to lean as if preparing to look back over its left shoulder. My fear peaked in anticipation of what I would see. When it did turn back at me, there was nothing more than the same dark grey with no features. After a second or two of us looking at each other, the figure bolted into my walk-in closet, covering about 15 feet in an instant, appearing only as a streak. I could not figure out what to do next. Eventually, I just went to the bathroom to splash my face, and then tried to go back to sleep, albeit with the lights on. Another year later, I had another moment waking from a nap to the presence, but not seeing anything. Strangely, I felt a sense of apology, as if its motive was not to frighten me. In all instances, there never seemed to be any malicious intent. Once I moved out to a new place, I never had another experience to that level. Fascinating and disturbing at the same time. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 221. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. If you yourself have a story, be it paranormal or of one of the other themes I do, please do send it along to kingofthecities@gmail.com. That's kingofthecities@gmail.com. Where are we now? It's Friday. Got to get down on Friday. Okay, let's see. Possibly stream tonight. If not, there will be like a regular Saturday stream. At least that is my intent. We shall see what happens, but my intent is to do a regular stream Might leave it a little later so that everyone that wants to participate can actually participate. Okay, and I think I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.